Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. We're back again with another video where we are grading all of the champions of 2019. This is the third video, 5-video series, because I have broken down each video and I'm going to be rating champions 5 at a time. Today we're going to be looking at, you can say, your average Joes, basically spot number 11 to spot number 15. These are the champions that definitely by no means are bad champions or horrible champions, but at the same time they do not really have that X factor to be in top of the tier lists, and so we better get started. And our first entry at spot number 15 is kind of funny one because he's pretty much everything but average, and there is nothing average about this guy, maybe only his utility department. But when it comes to the damage, he's top creme de la creme, the hardest hitting champion, or one of the hardest hitting champions. Basically, he hits so hard, Kabam decided that they need to bring him in a line with the rest of the competition. So that pretty much gives you an idea. This man can throw a punch. Once he's ramped up, there is pretty much nobody else that can finish out fights in endgame content as quick as this guy can. However, there are obviously a couple of downsides, and that is his sustainability. Now, his block proficiency isn't even that particularly rubbish. It's definitely far from good, but it can compete with many champions like Gladiator, Hulk, and stuff like that. The problem comes when you combine this subpar block proficiency with his playstyle that requires you to parry a lot and throw your heavy attacks. That means instead of having like that invincibility effect like Captain America Infinity War has, where basically you have perfect parries and you feel that you can take a punch like a champ, even though this guy looks like a champ, he takes a punch like a chump. Because yeah, he gets chipped down quite quickly, and typically in an endgame scenario, by the time you ramp him up properly, he's already almost dead. So you either have to play pretty much perfect in order to be able to ramp him up to the max, or you will often have to invest some potions into him, or obviously there is an alternative of dedicating your entire questing team to give this man some sustainability to be able to dish out the damage, but that kind of makes you sacrifice all of the utility that you have brought with you. So we can see that there are definite issues when it comes to using this guy in endgame. Aside from Variant 2, he's an absolute powerhouse in Variant 2 because his buffs last longer, he's an extra large champion, he absolutely shreds everything around there. But aside from that, his limited use in endgame is what lands him in spot number 15. Unfortunately, he is a champion, however, that is also up for rebalance, so hopefully Kabam actually balances him, not just nerf him. They can take away slight amount of his damage, but if they give him a bunch more sustainability, that would be worthwhile exchange, and he can potentially skyrocket to the top of the tier list if he actually can take a punch like a champ for a change. And that basically is going to be it about this. And now we're going to move on to spot number 14. And spot number 14 is a fairly peculiar champion. He was a fair bit hyped, and hype about this guy has died down a bit. But everybody seems to be talking about Mysterio these days. Why? Because Mysterio is arguably probably the most annoying boss in 6.3. And famously, Kabam decided it would be a great idea to put Mysterio on Acid Wash node, even though he's pretty much immune to poison. And yeah, so that is always happy times. Now, Mysterio is a champion that does on paper have extremely versatile toolkit. He can easily access poison with his heavy attacks. He can take punch on a chin like a champ after his level 1 and then do damage to opponent while regenerating all the damage it took. There is some power control. There is one of the best heal blocks in the game because it's passive and because you can access it with your light attack. And in theory, you'd think he would be a real big powerhouse. Now, his problem is because his actual power of the house hides behind level 3, and he has no inbuilt ways how to rapidly get to level 3s. Like, we can say that Dr. Doom's power lies behind his level 3s, but he has a lot of different ways outside of even Mystic Dispersion to actually get to that level 3 quicker. Same with Namor. Now, Namor does have to throw several level 3s, but then you can start spamming your special attacks and you just do an extraordinary amount of damage. With Mysterio, he is basically lacking any kind of power gain mechanic whatsoever to access his burst main damage, and he has one problem bigger than that. And that problem is that you kind of have a feeling of being punished whenever you use his abilities, because he works on his like gas charges, and whenever you want to throw a special attack or whenever you want to throw that like heavy and poison opponent, you consume all of these charges, and then the rest of your abilities are basically downgraded to a child's level, kind of like, because if you don't have any charges, then 7-second heal block turns into 1-second heal block, which is hardly worth mentioning. And things like that kind of make him somewhat awkward to use, and you always have to kind of compromise what you need to do, and then you kind of have to discard the rest of it. And that is a choice that basically costs him one of the higher spots on this list, because if he could do everything that he can on paper without needing to compromise, without ever consuming these gas charges, and just flat out have all of those abilities, he would be much higher on the list, because he would be extremely versatile with poison immunity, immunity to ability accuracy reduction, he can shut down evades from Spider-Verse heroes, so on and so forth. So there's quite a lot that would be going on for the guy, but unfortunately, because of that mechanic, it's kind of made impractical. Now, I still like the guy, I still think he definitely has his uses, but with that, he has been downgraded to a champion who, yeah, has his uses, but is not something you would want to bring in a quest as your main questing champion, for instance. And therefore, he sits in spot number 14. Moving on to spot number 13, and this was a bit difficult, and I still kind of reserve the right to change my mind about this champion later on, because he's quite new. And it's Mr. Fantastic. Now, Mr. Fantastic, under certain conditions, can do some incredible things, stack millions of debuffs, have close to 100% chance to evade all of the incoming attacks, and his area of expertise is so wide that the only thing you can kind of fault on the guy is lack of immunities, but he can act to a degree like Void and do damage with his debuffs over time and bypass all sorts of immunities for that, like life cycle mode. Now he has Stagger, he has Heal Block with his synergies, and he can access Shock and Fury buffs and Passive Furies and Petrify and just all sorts of crazy stuff. And when everything's happening and when he's properly synergized up, he's insane, crazy good champion, plus that increased power gain lets you spawn specials for days. And there is a lot he can do, but also that typically kind of requires you to dedicate an entire team to him, which is a huge downside whenever you enter an endgame quest, because all of these nodes are so specific and you hardly ever are able to do that, maybe outside of Ghost, just because of Ghost being able to deal with so much and having basically all of the immunities to a degree, because technically Ghost is not immune to anything. But anyways, moving on. So Mr. Fantastic, he also has a unique ability set where he can activate his pre-fight abilities and let other champions fight. And now that is something new to the game, and that is something that has a lot of potential options. And I think that is one of the things that kind of describes Mr. Fantastic the best. There are endless possibilities in combination of his own abilities, his own debuffs, his synergies, his ability to affect different champion fights, and I think he's extremely valuable addition to everybody's roster. But if he wants to move up the list, he needs a chance where he can prove himself. He needs a piece of content where he can be vital. He needs some people, some players actually showcase him and show what he can do and how it can exactly benefit and where are the best places to use this guy. So I hope that with time, this guy is going to be basically kind of like a Void or Quake that just finds more and more uses and moves up and up and up to the point where he's considered one of the elite champions. Currently, he sits comfortably right in the middle in spot number 13, because potentially all of that shebang that he has, well, maybe it's just going to be a lot of smoke with no fire behind it. Or maybe he's gonna prove himself to be one of the kind of like staple champions everybody should try and acquire. And therefore I am kind of cautiously optimistic, but currently this guy lands in spot number 13. Moving on to spot number 12, and this is already kind of controversial territory, but do remember that this is already kind of like towards the top of the list. And that will be Still Suit Spidey. Now, first things first, and a huge disclaimer, I'm not a big fan of any Spider-Man characters in this game, maybe outside Spider-Gwen. She's cool and thick. But the rest of the Spideys are typically a bit too flimsy for my liking, and this guy is no exception. His health pool really isn't the greatest, and he's a bit squishy and stuff like that. However, being able to access slow debuff, which is a fairly exclusive kind of club, we only have She-Hulk and Spider-Gwen so far, I believe. Maybe there's some other champion that I'm blanking out on at the moment. He would be the third champion who has the slow debuff, and slow debuff is one of the most versatile and useful things in this game, period. That makes him even worth talking about and considering. When it comes to the rest of the stuff, yes, he can throw a decent punch. No, he's not the hardest hitting champion. No, he's not the weakest hitting champion. He can crit a lot, he can do a lot of damage. All that is good, like you expect from modern day Spider-Man, following the examples set by Stark Spider-Man. That slow debuff is what sets him apart. Now, the third pre-fight ability, Underweight, it's completely worthless. Basically, forget about that. Basically, this guy has two modes. Either you activate a pre-fight ability and set it to slow, or it goes to default vulnerability, which helps with his damage output. And that is how you should play the guy, and that is all you should know about him. The third one is Rubbish, which is a huge missed opportunity because Underweight debuff is also pretty cool. But basically, you kind of also have to sacrifice. If you want to access the slow debuff, you sacrifice some of your damage, or you can ignore the slow debuff stuff and you have full amount of damage. Now, I'm not a big fan to the fact that you do have to cycle to your level 3s in longer fights to refresh your web cartridges. That is one of the big kind of like downsides for the guy, for me as well. But luckily, he hits hard enough to finish many of the fights before you have to do that. Outside of that, I think, in my opinion, he's proving himself to be better than Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, because he has damage on par with Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, maybe slightly less, but that slow debuff is just so valuable and it's incredible, and I value it a lot, and therefore this, in my opinion, is probably the best Spider-Man character in the game. Not a fan, but you can't deny that he can get the job done. He's never going to be your first choice for most of the tasks if you have big roster. Like if you need to deal with some stuff, there's always going to be Quake, or there's always going to be better options. And he's never going to be the number one, but he's one of those champions that can still get in there despite not being your first choice and get the job done, in my opinion. And yeah, so that puts him in spot number 12, and spot number 11 currently. I'm gonna give it away to, where are my 6 stars? Human Torch. And Human Torch is a noodle by default. His damage is average, he's not particularly bulky, his attack isn't all that high, and in generic matchup, he really is not the greatest champion. Though the Incinerates can be nifty, ability to reverse heals, kind of cool, and the Incinerate and Cold Snap immunity obviously is useful. However, when he goes in a matchup against a Mystic champion, or against any champion where energy damage is a thing, so champions like Darkhawk or Sentinel, for instance, or Magnetos, or so on and so forth, then he can go off. Basically, he gets those smolders, he gets huge damage over time increase, keeps his temperature up high, those Incinerates last longer, he does so much more damage, and it's a sight to be seen. So he's more or less kind of like situational niche champion that can be really effective in certain situations, but really kind of pathetic in some other ones. If you bring him in a wrong matchup, his damage is gonna come close to, well, maybe not as bad as Ebony Maws, but I'm quite sure that Diablo can out-damage this guy against Winter Soldier, for instance. I'll just leave it at that and there. But yeah, so there we go. If there is a right matchup, this guy can be insane. He could be at top of the list if he would perform like that in every single fight, as if he were to be fighting Mystic champions, for instance. And also there's additional bonus with this guy, which is his pre-fight ability. Basically nothing in the game is immune to the damage over time from his pre-fight ability. Plus it comes with built-in power sting, which is also cool, and at the same time you still keep reversing opponent's heal. And the pre-fight ability just makes him a bit step higher than he could already be. Those no flames are passives, so no debuff immunity, no shrug offs, things like that. Even incinerate immune champions are taking that damage from no flames because no flames are not incinerates, and he can really put the heat on the opponents. And yeah, therefore he definitely lands in spot number 11, and I think quite rightfully so. But that will pretty much conclude today's list. So now we only have basically our top 10 left, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, I'm gonna catch you guys next time. See ya.